Here he is.
I'm going to call this meeting to order. Under the resolution for virtual meetings that was adopted by the board on May 18th, we have minutes from the previous meeting. I'm assuming everyone has had a chance to look at those. Are there any comments or concerns about the minutes? Hi, Jim.
Hi, how are you?
Okay, do we have a motion to accept the minutes from the last meeting?
So moved.
Thank you. All in favor? Aye.
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 Is there anyone opposed?
Aye.
Thank you.
Marcy, I think you also need to do the minutes from the special session.
Oh, yes. Yes, and we had a meeting, a closed meeting on October 5th. Those minutes were very brief. I'm assuming that everyone saw them. Is there any objection to accepting those minutes as they are written? Thank you. Does anyone on the board have an announcement to make? Are there any comments from the public? Sarah, I'm assuming you're not seeing any indications of comments from anyone?
I'm seeing no chats or hands raised.
Thank you very much. So we will move on then to the trustee continuing education. David and Jerry are going to be talking about the mechanics of the budget to try to get us all up to speed before we begin diving into that next month. Welcome, Jerry.
Okay, Jerry, is your mic ready to go?
It is now.
Excellent. So I'm going to share my screen to show a brief presentation here. This is actually excellent timing because this is the work that Jerry and I have been focusing on for the last few weeks and will do for eternity from now on, just focusing on budget work. So let me do screen share. Okay. So the request for CE was about how staff put together the proposed budget that the library board's budget and finance committee is going to be discussing next week, and then the full board will be discussing in November. And basically, there are three main folks that work on that. It's Jerry, Donnelly Grossman, and myself, with an assist from Zach as needed. And we collect input from all of JMRL's managers throughout the process. So the first thing is to review this timeline here, most of which you all should be aware of because it's part of what you approve every year in the summer. This is the timeline for putting together the entire budget. In mid-September, managers submit their personnel and operating requests. So these are generally requests that have to do with personnel, like if they need new staff or they need to make some sort of adjustment to staff. In September, this board sets budget priorities based on the 5-year plan. So we talked about this briefly in September, and the priority that we discussed was trying to get a 2% raise for staff next year. There were no new personnel requests coming straight out of the 5-year plan in September. There were some left over from last year. In October, the Personnel Committee reviews and prioritizes those manager-submitted personnel and operating requests. So that happened a few weeks ago. Today, the Personnel Committee will present that full prioritized list to the board. In November, it's next week, the Budget Finance Committee will craft the draft budget along with staff and submit it to the board. In November, the board will also adopt the proposed budget unless there's an issue that needs to be discussed there or if we don't have a quorum. By January 15th, trustees and the director will meet with jurisdictions to discuss the proposed budget. By mid-February, managers submit their equipment requests for the next fiscal year. So this is things that are large-scale items, not just, we need more paper or things like that, but we need a new circulation desk or we need new computers. And in June, the Budget and Finance Committee will meet to craft the final budget. So it will be the operational budget plus that equipment request budget. And at that point, we should have heard back from every jurisdiction about what level of funding we can expect in the next fiscal year. And then by July 1st, the board will vote on that and accept a budget. So the first of those steps that I mentioned starts with JMRL's managers. We use a budget request form for all three of the budgets that they can submit, the equipment one, the personnel one, and the Friends budget, which we deal with separately with the Friends. The managers discuss this. We bring this up in our managers meeting beforehand. I talk to managers about this process and what their needs are going into the year. It's far out, it's 10 months before the next fiscal year. So generally these are tied to bigger initiatives, such as in Nelson this year, where there's a new building that's going to require more support, or if we're going to be adding more hours, things like that. Every once in a while, it will be just a change and something's happened, more children have moved to this neighborhood, we need more children's services. So managers have to make a suggestion here, and they need to have a rationale for it and base it on the 5-year plan. So there has to be something in the strategic plan that backs up a request for more personnel. Here's a snapshot of a tool that Zach built that we use. It was designed to handle the compression issue that we just finished last year, but we use it as a tool to adjust big numbers and look at how it's going to affect the overall budget. So you can enter variables in it and see how the overall picture is going to change. So for instance, you can change the pay scale. You can change the raises that we're trying to give next year. We're working on if you change medical, it changes the whole thing. So rather than doing them piecemeal, this is just a tool at our disposal that I've anonymized. Normally it has the names of folks on it, but I did anonymize that for this whole presentation. This is just to give you a snapshot of one of the tools that we're using. This is something that Zach programmed and built in-house. So thank you, Zach. Next, that goes to Donna Lee. You do not need to adjust your screen. That Wingdings font is just a way to anonymize the names there, because this is normally names. The different colors signify changes that have happened throughout there, but you can see for every individual employee, I hope you can see, it's a little small and blurry, but for every individual employee, there's data here about what band and stage they're in, how many hours they work throughout the year, what their current hourly rate is this year, what their annual salary is, what increase we're looking at giving them for next year, how that changes their hourly rate, how that changes their yearly salary, what the FICA costs are for federal insurance there, what the retirement costs are, what the life insurance costs are, what the medical insurance costs are, and then totals. So we have a line like that for every JMRL employee, from substitutes up to myself, that Donna Lee manages. She keeps up to date year round in various formats. So once a month or so, I ask her for a report on this. And then when we start budget season, we'll do a snapshot now, and we'll go through probably 10 versions between now and June as information changes, as the board makes decisions about what to add and not to add. Donna Lee then sends at this budget construction phase a cleaned up version of that that's by location to Jerry, so he can use it to put together the whole budget there. So again, this is a snapshot, but it says the personnel costs at each location. Okay, and in central, as this example shows, it's broken up by department. For Crozet and the other branches, it's just a total picture there. So we get an idea of what our personnel costs are going to be before we start looking at the overall budget, although much like Donna Lee is adjusting that sheet year round, Jerry is adjusting what our operational costs are going to be year round. Then it gets handed over to Jerry. So Jerry, all yours.
Thank you, David. So what I have shown on this screen and the following one is just two sample worksheets that I use internally with David to look at 3 years of actuals. As you can see, fiscal 18, 19, and 20. Those numbers are pulled off of SAP, the city's and the library's financial accounting system. You might recall seeing the same kind of setups in your monthly budget reports, so because they are the same. I'm also able to pull from SAP the fiscal 21 budget, the second to last column to the right, and then use, and that's all downloaded into Excel. Then I start crafting the fiscal 22 information as well, adding all the information that David presented from Donna Lee on the personnel level, and then on the non-personnel. So just a couple of just highlight a few accounts that kind of share the thought process to go through what I generally look at it as a combination of different strategies, if you will, depending on the accounts. Can range from a 3-year average. I might look at spikes in certain accounts, projected future conditions, things that we know of. We obviously had on everyone's mind COVID-19 and what changes that's made financially to the operation, and other trends, one-time costs, et cetera, that might stand out when we look at the actuals and the current year budget. So, for example, about halfway down service contracts, far right column, $85,000. You can see that number bumps up a little bit year by year. That's primarily related to the custodial services contract at Central Branch. It's got a formula. It's built in. We can look at the contract and see what increases there might be there. The line just above that for utilities, you can see it's pretty consistent. In actuals, fiscal 20, it dropped about 10 grand over the course of the year because the building was mostly closed down from mid-March to the end of the year. This budget for fiscal 22 anticipates will be open, fully as we have been in the past. So returning to those levels that we had in the past. So that's an example for the Central Branch. David, if you could move to the second or the next screen. This is the library, what is labeled the library administration local budget, basically the regional costs for JMRL. Same kind of thought process. One I'll just highlight in particular, about 10 lines down. You can see medical supplies, nothing there in fiscal 18 and 19, fiscal 20, $14,000 primarily. Cleaning and, basically medical supplies as they've been listed there, related to COVID-19, gloves, masks, disinfectant spray, wipes, etc. Moving into fiscal 22, we have a similar amount there. I'm going to break that out into different categories later, but for right now, it's listed under cleaning supplies, just a little bit, a couple of lines above, but that anticipates about 6 months of supplies that we'll need into fiscal 22. So hopefully after halfway through fiscal 22, we can return to quote unquote normal, and that's reflected in the budget there. So just another example of, sort of line by line, account by account analysis we do for every branch and every account. So moving to the next slide. So this is a similar format, but rolled up to the entire JMRL budget. My glasses there, $8.6 million total that is listed right now. As David emphasized a little bit, this is a snapshot in time. Will change numerous times over the next several months. But this gives us just another way to look at, if you're down looking at the branch level, a change might not show up so clearly at the branch level, but if those same changes are occurring at all branches or many of them, they might show up in a dollar amount here, and that's something you might go back and research and figure out why and what seems more appropriate for the upcoming year. So moving to the final slide. This is another form that you're familiar with from prior year's budgets. This takes the total budget. If you go, I guess 5 lines from the bottom in the far right column, proposed fiscal 22, 7.9 million. It's a little different from the 8.6 million that you saw on the prior screen, because this figure here does not include state aid. But what this does is parcel out the allocation by jurisdiction, what amount that each jurisdiction contributes to the JMRL budget each year. And that is based on circulation figures. The second line from the top, Albemarle, Charlottesville, et cetera, across the top. And that percentage figure under there represents the circulation per jurisdiction. And the dollars flow from there, and the regional costs for each branch are calculated based on those numbers. So, and again, as David said, we, as changes happen during the course of the year, use all of this basically Excel spreadsheet to plug in and make those revisions and have it roll back up to this level. Questions?
Let me throw in there, Jerry, that that the percentages that you just described there for regional circulation use are a 3-year average, so that there are no major surprises if there's a change, like a new library comes online or something like that. Folks know that there's a 3-year period that's being looked at.
So when you're making estimates about the number of personnel that you need, you're largely basing those on circulation levels. What criteria do you use along with the staff for recommending additions in personnel?
Well, we use the guidance of the strategic plan, of the 5-year plan first and foremost. So if there are initiatives there or things that the 5-year plan committee and the board agreed to ahead of time, such as new hours at Northside. So then it's a calculus to try to figure out, well, what would the schedule look like? How many bodies would we need in order to cover that? Well, what are the skills needed? What other services would we need to provide? And there are some, there's language in the 5-year plan about creating or working on developing an outreach department. So annually we would look at that. Marion and I would look at that to say, okay, well, here's what the goal is. What will we need in order to meet that? So it's less just a branch coming to me and saying, we would like more support. It has to be something that's backed up by what the 5-year plan is saying. So if there's a problem, if there's we can't cover our Saturdays or folks can't take vacations or things like that, then I would encourage that manager to fill out that form and bring it to the personnel committee to discuss.
So that's really a secondary consideration. Most of it deals with forward planning.
Most of it does, yes, unless I'm aware of a situation or a manager brings to my attention a situation where they're having coverage issues or they can't meet our mission basically because they don't have the staff for it.
This was a concern that's been brought up on the board self-evaluation several years running, that we needed to have a better understanding of the mechanics of how the budget was arrived at. Is there anyone who has, I'm sure both David and Jerry would not consider any question a dumb question. Is there anybody who has a question that they would just like to get an answer to before we start plunging into the budget season about how these numbers are arrived at and how we go about defending them, I guess, to the jurisdictions as well?
Not at the moment. I just want to say thank you for the presentation. I thought that was very clear and very helpful.
I agree with Thomas. I feel like the accommodations for, just medical supplies. Who would have thought that we need a robust medical supplies line for our budget in a library? So thank you so much for all the care you all have given to making this work.
Speaking of care and cares, Jerry is coding every cost that we're spending towards. So those lines there were medical supplies, and next year, Jerry, I think it was cleaning supplies. Those are the big budget areas in the city's software that we're pulling from to pay for those things. But every expense that we're making is coded as a COVID cost, basically, so that at any given moment we could tell you especially on supplies and things, that the cost that we have spent, in the hopes that if there's money available at any point, we could point to that and say, here's how much we have been spending. And it's a lot.
Wendy? Turn on your mic, Wendy.
My question is not really a question, but a concern where it becomes problematic or I don't understand, is when you all have developed this quite obvious expense model and budget, and then we go to Louisa and there we get in a position like we were before, where Louisa gets behind in terms, and I know it's not really related. There's nothing you can do budget wise except present that, but that's where the problem comes in from me understanding, or not understanding, but just maybe having a new board of supervisors. I don't know, but we
Well,
get. I don't know how the rest of the board or the rest of the jurisdiction feels about the fact that Louisa always seems to be lagging. We've been better the last couple times, but you know, we, even with all that preparation and the need for new personnel and the need for this, it's just disheartening that we have to pull those things back. And I don't know what the solution is, but
I think it's important when we're talking to our jurisdictions about, you know, making sure that we're clear about what the costs of current services are and how those change year over year, so that we can explain and show, well, here's what we're offering, and here's what it costs this year, and here's what it will cost next year, because all of our jurisdictions understand that there are changes in medical and changes in retirement, and you know, there are factors that we can't control, like these COVID expenses are not something that anybody going into last year budgeted for. And then really showing them the value of what we could do with added services, you know, what we would like to accomplish, what our strategic plan goals are, what the library board sees as the future of service in that county, to be able to show them, well, here's where we are, here's what we need to keep doing what we're doing, but here's where you need to be, and here's where, you know, here's what we can do with X dollars, basically.
right. And I think you all have done you and Ophelia have done an excellent job at those presentations, but that's just where I get frustrated, I guess. And I guess maybe just re-emphasizing all of those, what you just said, and we just have to hope that we get a better response. Well, will be very interesting this year because everybody's operating with the COVID issues and with the decreased openings and services. So it'll be interesting to see how everyone and the different organizations come up with their budgets.
David or Jerry, is it fair to say, in terms of what the jurisdictions, where their jurisdiction dollars go, you know, the library collection is mostly paid for by state aid. Programming is almost entirely paid for by Friends. So the jurisdictions are mostly paying for their own facilities. And then it seems to me the large driver then of costs are just the staff hours, and then the staff costs that are, you know, required to meet those service hour levels. Am I missing anything just from a big picture standpoint? If I had to, you know, summarize it in 3 bullet points for a county supervisor, that's what they would understand. Am I correct in that?
Yeah, I would say that that's a fairly accurate picture there. The personnel costs are the largest costs for all of our jurisdictions, and that last slide that Jerry showed is a pretty good breakdown of what the jurisdictions pay for each individual branch versus what they pay regionally as well. And then within the budget, it shows the bigger breakdown of personnel costs versus operational costs. So for example, in the budget that we're working on now, that the budget committee will be talking about next week, our non-personnel costs, I'm estimating to be smaller than they were this current year, just because of you know, the cutting corners basically in anticipation of a rough budget year. But the personnel costs, you know, are a large percentage of what each jurisdiction is paying for, and those they might not go up in leaps and bounds if we're not adding hours and services. But every year that a person stays on with JMRL, it costs a little bit more in salary and retirement and health benefits and things like that, which is good. We really do a good job of making sure our staff are valued and supported and have the best tools necessary. But I think that your summary is a pretty good one. Jerry, anything to add?
No, I think that hits it.
Great, thanks.
Are there any other questions or comments? Thanks, you two. I think that was really helpful. We'll move on to new business. And David is going to be discussing the customer service plan and the statement that is in process from the staff.
Yeah, so this was one of my 3 goals for last fiscal year and is a 5-year plan goal. It came out of the 5-year plan goal 3, objective 3, which reads, in fiscal year 20, which just finished in June, craft a customer service statement and form a customer service committee to standardize the library's approach to service. The customer service philosophy outlined in the new statement should be integrated into staff training materials and assessments. So this committee was actually formed as part of the 3 new committees that JMRL formed around this time last year, the Staff Equity Committee, the Training Committee, and the Customer Service Committee. The Customer Service Committee membership intentionally focused on a broad swath of employees, geographically diverse and all in direct public service. So I'm going to give them a shout out now. The chair is JMRL Circulation Manager, Brittany Eversberg. And the membership are Ann Lindberg, the Scottsville Children's Specialist, Heather Pennick, Central Reference Librarian and JMRL's Volunteer Coordinator, Latasha Richards, Northside Library Circulation Supervisor, Nancy Toms from Crozet, soon to be replaced by Amy Pence-Langtoad, who is Crozet's Circ Supervisor, Ginny Reese, the Green Branch Manager, Sadie Evergreen, the Louisa Branch Specialist, Tim Carrier, JMRL's Young Adult Manager, and Yulita Ellis, Nelson Memorial's Branch Specialist. Their first meeting was on January 13th of 2020, and they met throughout the winter and spring. They met virtually in April, and they chose a statement. So that was their first task, is to work on this customer service statement. They came up with 4 options, voted on them, and selected one. That committee has not met since Tier 4 service began. Because of the nature of the direct service of most of those positions, they haven't been able to meet. They're scheduled to have a meeting in November. So the statement, the Customer Service Committee sees as a complement to JMRL's vision and values, and the goal is to get it on signage posted in the building. They narrowed it down to 4 options, and they came up with a winner in May. I'm going to share my screen to show it to you. Oh, there it is. So the proposed customer service statement is that serving the patron is JMRL's top priority. Positive library experiences connect JMRL with the communities we serve, fostering personal growth and lifelong learning. I've got the other options I can share out with the board later if you'd like to see those as well. So what the Customer Service Committee would like to do is to have the board consider this statement for adoption in November. So it would go on your November agenda. Or at that point, the board could take some time to wordsmith it or send it back to the Customer Service Committee if there's something that they feel needs to be included there. That was the main task for the committee in that 6-month period between January and the end of June. The work that they're working on now are teacher cards and institutional cards. So this means accounts that would provide different levels of service for teachers and for institutions. Mostly these would be a little bit similar to the accounts that JMRL has, the outreach accounts for the bookmobile to provide drop-off service at certain in-home assisted living, at certain assisted living facilities. But on the other end, we see a lot of daycares that need some sort of service, and they end up with an individual checking out all things. So it'd be kind of trying to deal with those in order to make that an easier process for teachers and these institutions. We have not had institutional cards for many years. There are a lot of details to work out there. And the other main goal for the future of the Customer Service Committee is to come up with a customer service manual to standardize customer service at JMRL, which we don't currently have one, and they've begun work on it, but that's a longer term proposition. So questions about that committee or comments about that statement? I can flash it back up again.
2 things, David. One, I would like to see the other potential
Sure.
statements that they came up with. And also, what is the proposed timeline then for the manual development?
I don't think we have a proposed timeline on that. It's been on hold while we've dealt with other issues the last 6 months. The 5-year plan goal was only for the statement and to form the committee, and that was in fiscal year 20. So I think a realistic goal for that would be by the end of next fiscal year to give that committee time to work on it. And then we would want to bring it back and have probably the personnel committee look at it and the full board have a chance to weigh in on it. But there is none stated right now.
Okay. Is it possible for them to try to give us an idea about a timeline
Sure.
when they meet in November?
Yeah, that seems reasonable.
They should have some idea about the size of the project, which it sounds to me could be fairly massive.
It could be, and we also want it based on the policy committee discussion earlier about a policy personnel manual. We want to make sure that we're not duplicating any efforts there. So yes, I think that's perfectly reasonable.
David, have you identified, is this something that other libraries are doing with it, sort of the dedicated customer service principles, and do we have models to start from that you've identified?
Yeah, the customer service committee went and surveyed the peer libraries throughout the state and also pulled some nationally that they liked and has that information. They went through.
Okay, so Marcy, I think it is a big task, but it may be not reinventing a wheel type of task.
Well, I guess that's why I wanted to get an idea from the committee about how they saw their job.
Yeah.
And what they thought they were going to have to put into it individually as a single library system. David, could we see the other statements that they came up with?
Sure. Do you want to look at them now?
Well, is there a better time to do it? I mean,
Well, I would email them around, but
oh, okay.
that's fine. Here, let me find them.
I'd just like to be able to give them some feedback before their meet in November if the board has any feedback for them about these statements.
Yeah, it's shared in my drive, Marcy. It's going to take me a minute probably to pull them up. As you can see that this is actually the working document that the staff was, that the committee was working on. So they've got some comments still in there.
And it appears that they chose in part for brevity, David?
Yeah, that was part of the guidance that yes, they chose something that would be posted behind circulation staff desks and service desks, something that would be much like the full board did with the mission statement, to try to find something that was not a mouthful, basically.
One piece of feedback I would suggest for option 3, in our mission statement, we made a very specific point of including the words "for all," and it seems to me that could be easily just added to option number 3 for the same reasons.
Okay, I'm sure the committee will.
We say communities we serve, but we just want to keep reinforcing this concept that it's the libraries for everybody.
Seems like you could add a.
You can just put "for all" right there.
One of the things that I really like about option 1 is a statement about the staff, saying that in fact, it's really important for the staff to be of the highest quality possible and be as well qualified for library work as possible. I think something like that might be actually encouraging to people. I realize that our focus needs to be on the service aspects, but I think making a statement about what our staff expects of itself is also something that would be useful.
Has everyone had a chance to look at these?
Well,
I'll
David,
around.
oh, let me see. I had a question.
Sure.
So this is going to be posted in addition, isn't that what you said? This was going to be posted in the, at the circulation desks?
Yeah, that's the idea.
Then I think it definitely has to be short, happy, and to the point. Otherwise, it's not going to be read.
Yeah, I agree.
It needs to be, and since we have if our mission statement is also within range and posted, I think you could get by with making this, it just, to me, it just sounds so administrative and dull. And I don't think our libraries are either one of those when you come in. The people are happy. I think if the customer service committee is going to have this handbook, that's going to deal with, keeping true to our mission statement. And this should just be a powerful, we're qualified, we're here. You're, or, something serving you is, I mean, I hate to say it, but with a little bit more of a commercial kind of happiness.
Have it your way.
Yeah. I don't know. That's just me. I just,
Okay, I can give that feedback back to this committee.
because when you come in, it's really the person first and then whatever's posted. So when the librarian's there and they're smiling and, can I help you? That's the message. So it should be like that.
So Wendy, would something like this carry the tone you're talking about? And I'm just doing this off the top of my head. We are here to serve you.
Yes, you. It has to be
Library
personal.
experiences are our top priority, in order to, and then maybe some of the other.
Yeah, and I don't even think you need the other, but yes,
Yeah.
exactly. Make
That makes it more of a personal.
We're here to serve you.
Yeah,
You
more of a
are our
personal
top
tone.
priority. Patron, a lot of people come in, don't even know they're patrons.
Yeah.
They're just, that's stuffy.
I really like that suggestion, Wendy, that we move patron and say, we are here to serve you.
You, yeah.
So,
Something like welcome to your library.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, something like some kind of direct address. And I love
Exactly.
the idea about the joy in the language,
Yeah.
that can just be like, we're honored to serve you. We're happy you're here or something.
Exactly.
Just something that I think that I like all three of them. But if brevity is a concern, if you imagine like putting this behind the library in like, I don't know, gold stenciled letters, for example, we're going to have to like make it a lot shorter. So, something like that, I think.
Aluminum, Lisa?
Well, I like Lisa's because we have some alliteration now. We're honored and happy.
I don't know. I was just thinking, I was
those
stuck on
kinds
the point
of
about the joy in the language, and I was like,
Yes.
yeah, it's nice to have some happy, snappy sentences,
Mhm.
and also help you feel addressed, like we're talking to you.
To you.
I'll tell you what, this is just off the top of my head here, but initially my plan was to have the board look at this today and then.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, no, that's fine. And then in November, kind of either wordsmith it or say, yeah, that's fine. What worked really well when we were working on the mission statement and the values was to get together a working group. So it wouldn't be just the customer service committee, but it could be any staff interested, any patrons interested, any board members interested, to try and do some of that wordsmithing that you're talking about. Would that be more useful to have that work done before the November board meeting? So the customer service committee representatives, plus any of you all that are interested, plus anybody with a stake that would like to participate.
That would be, we'll move things along and they could
Last
keep
time
going.
we had pizza, Wendy. I don't think that's going to be an option.
Oh, no donuts either. Oh my gosh. This virtual stuff is hard.
Okay, let me talk to the customer service committee about that. Because of the Thanksgiving holiday and the budget stuff, that might shift our timeline a bit.
Oh, right.
But
Just looking at all the work that they put in, I'm not criticizing any of those ideas per se. And I appreciate the work for sure. And I had one other question that kind of tied in with Michael, is that if they're how are they coordinating with the, are they going to wait till the end for the policy committee? And also this fits, I thought, really well into that cross-training idea. I mean, it just bolsters the ease with which you can cross-train if you have all of these like set in place. So I thought, so is that going to come after, you think?
When I was
Any kind of coordination between?
When I was talking about coordinating with the policy committee, was specifically about the two manuals, having a service
Yeah,
manual.
okay, the manual that they come up with, okay.
Right, so I don't want them to be, very similar or contradictory or anything like that. So I think there'll have to be close coordination there. In terms of the interior coordination, the hope is that all three of these new committees work together like a glove, like a hand in a glove, basically, so that the training committee clearly is going to have to know what the elements of the customer service manual are in order to help develop training for those. And the equity committee needs to have a say in what that manual is going to look like to make sure that it's being done through an equity lens and that it's not exclusionary in any way. So the coordination there is probably mostly via email, maybe every once in a while a joint session. The issue I described about this particular committee having a hard time getting together since we went to tier 4 is because all of these folks are working frontline customer service right now. So there is very little time where somebody is off a desk that they can coordinate together to do something. There's time to work on things, but getting them all together has been a challenge. So I know Brittany has something scheduled next month. That was a tangent, I think. Did I answer your question, Wendy?
Yeah, I just wanted to, I'm trying to get the big picture, how they all fit.
Any other comments or questions for David? Well, we'll look forward to seeing what they put together. And I think Wendy's comments were right on the money, as were Lisa's and Mike's. And I hope maybe the committee might be open to some board participation in that activity. Great. We have some committee reports. David is going to provide the Personnel Committee report notes because Carla wasn't able to be here this afternoon.
Yes, thank you. So Thomas and Kathy, if I forget anything or misstate anything, please jump in because you all were at the committee there. But basically, the committee reviewed the recommendations that managers made and prioritized them. There's kind of a super priority here, which is the state change to minimum wage laws, and there's a change happening midway through next fiscal year, which is going to affect a few JMRL positions, but that's law. That's not a recommendation. That's something that has to be worked into this budget. So from the things that were presented to the Personnel Committee, their top priority was to seek a 2% cost of living raise for library staff. Library staff did not get a cost of living raise coming into fiscal year 21. So they would like to see that worked into the budget. The second priority was for the position in Nelson County that was requested the last several years that the county is aware of. Marcy and I and Susan have talked to them about it. I know that at some point they recognize that with the new building, they're going to need to provide personnel to help support the hours and the outreach that they want to do there. The third was for the full-time regional IT position that is in the 5-year plan, was requested last year and did not make it in last year's budget discussions with jurisdictions. And the fourth was some various substitute hours at the Northside Library to support current operations. In my discussions with Albemarle County, was the primary funder for those, they have said that these don't necessarily have to be a separate request from them. We can kind of see where our budget is and whether or not we can afford those. So those are the recommendations from the Personnel Committee. I do have a comment on them, but let me make sure, Kathy and Thomas, is that correct?
That's what I remember.
Okay.
I also remember that. Uh-huh.
Since that personnel committee met, I had the annual meeting with the jurisdictions, and it's kind of a pre-budget meeting. It's written in our regional agreement that by October 15th, the administrative wings of each jurisdiction and myself will meet to talk about what perceived needs are for the next fiscal year and to hear about what their projections are. Of course, projections this year, that's a whole thing. But I left with the distinct impression that there is no chance for a new regional job, which is that IT position that we have been seeking there. That most of our jurisdictions are, they cannot, it's too early for them to say whether or not pay raises are going to make it for their own staff. I know Charlottesville and Albemarle didn't offer any last year, but what they're looking at is hiring freezes in the spring, and they are looking at trying to maintain current services without adding any new services. So this is not a new service, it's in support of current existing needs here. But JMRL has come up with a plan to move half of this position out of Mont Ave. We had somebody leave a position in Mont Ave that we're going to divide this fiscal year, 20 hours for Mont Ave and then 20 hours for IT support. So we're going to cover the gap for at least the next while here. It's my recommendation that this board ask the budget committee to remove that IT position from consideration, because I think that what we can do is let the jurisdictions know that there is a need here, but that we are going to use our existing resources to try and meet that need for the next year and then come back for it next year. So that's not from the personnel committee, that's from myself, but in looking at the budget figures for next year, I think that the 5%, the 2% raise is going to be a significant personnel cost to ask for, and that this cost regionally for the IT position is a significant cost that I don't believe is worth making at this point.
Just to be clear, David had mentioned earlier that Monticello Avenue is possibly being phased out since it doesn't seem to be filling the same functions that it did when it was created. Is that the reason that it's potentially movable?
Yeah, I think there are still needs there, and they're still serving a smaller section of the community. The computer lab itself is part of the personnel cost, that there are people there manning that lab, staffing that lab, I should say. The other end of it is the server hosting for nonprofits there. We have seen decreased usage over the years. So while we don't have an immediate plan to phase out, it is in the 5-year plan to review this annually. And with the workload there now, we made the decision in consultation with the manager of Mont Ave and with our IT department that a better use of resources would be to share one of those positions for the time being. So we're not looking at shuttering that department at this point, but there's we could better use those resources in IT right now, half of them.
Thank you. Does anyone else have any questions or comments about this topic? Well, then we'll look forward to hearing the Budget Committee's report at the next meeting of the board in November. And there was a meeting of the Policy Committee today, so Mike's going to give us an update from the Policy Committee.
Okay, the Policy Committee today looked at the Policy 1.6, unsolicited gifts of library materials. And generally, the library needs some flexibility to understand when gifts might be appropriate to accept or when they need to be reviewed for some possible pitfalls of hidden costs and so forth. And that flexibility is provided by the current policy. However, we sort of uncovered, talking in particular with some of the branch managers and staff, that in some cases there are gifts that are restricted in some way. They come with an expectation that there might be a plaque that's displayed for a certain number of years, or this gift is expected to be maintained in some way, and that's really not addressed by the current policy. So we're going to kind of at the same time, some of those also fall into the category of gifts that are solicited or part of fundraisers. Again, it opens the question, well, we're acknowledging this fundraiser gift, but the facility might be, we might have a new remodeling, 5 years or 10 years from now, how do we handle some of these acknowledgements? So we're going to come back and sort of broaden the scope of unsolicited gifts to just talk about gifts to the library, and sort of add some language to cover some of these types of cases. So we're back to a little bit back to the drawing board on that. I think David and I are going to talk about it and have a draft for a future, if not the next, policy committee meeting. So you'll be seeing that down the road. We also looked at printing and copying, and right now we have sort of a very specific policy that mentions specific fees for printing and copying, and we feel like this is sort of an older policy that's sort of from a time when these sorts of services were less widely available, so people needed to come more often to the library or someplace like the library. We're gonna recommend that the specific fees for copying and printing, and also fax use, is something that's a service and is still used. Those get removed from the policy manual and just added to our schedule of fees that we like overdue fees and so forth that the board reviews regularly, and essentially just handle it on that level while removing it from the policy manual as a top level policy. We're going to have the library managers at their managers meeting kind of discuss that as one last go around, but if they don't have any objection to that plan, then we'll do a reading of this proposal in November, and the reading would consist of, we're going to essentially delete this policy from the manual. Then we would vote on it in December. We're not going to do the reading today because we wanted this manager meeting to have a chance to kind of weigh in before we went to the step of a formal proposal in front of the board. Any comments or questions so far? Okay, the last is just an update on, we've had this idea or initiative to, again, the existing policy manual is a little bit inconsistent because it has these a few very specific employee related policies that we've been wanting to separate or reorganize from the kind of the public facing parts of what the public needs to know about their interactions with the library on sort of a day-to-day basis. So we've had this idea of creating a separate employee manual, and we're sort of just working towards that step by step. This month's step was that David and I had a conversation with the City of Charlottesville HR manager, and the reason that it's important to coordinate with the City of Charlottesville is that currently we use the City of Charlottesville for HR services, and we're covered by their City of Charlottesville HR manual, but we sort of confirmed in that conversation that it's common within the City of Charlottesville for other certain departments. The examples we discussed were emergency responders and also some of the social work departments who interface with the public, for them to have their own sort of supplemental, the Charlottesville person referred to them as SOPs, but essentially departmental policies that sit on top of what the very broad baseline that the City of Charlottesville supplies. So the takeaway was, if the library wanted to move in that direction, it would be consistent with other departments within, or I should say departments within the City of Charlottesville, and it wouldn't be a conflict. So as long as we just keep in touch with them during the process to make sure that we don't do anything that would be a conflicting level of scope. But first, as far as the first pass, that was all green light as far as the City of Charlottesville. So our next step is going to be for David and I to have some discussions with the state library, just in terms of getting guidance as far as what the scope of what sorts of things would be in a policy level employee manual versus a procedure level. And we're going to kind of do the research on that and come back to the policy committee and sort of discuss our findings at the next policy committee meeting. And that's basically what I have. If there's comments or questions. Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. That was very thorough.
Next, old business, David is going to give us an update on the COVID-19 response plan.
Thank you, Marcy. So next Monday, the 2nd, Crozet and Scottsville will be joining Greene, Louisa, and Nelson in moving to Tier 3 appointment service. Scottsville, unfortunately, at least to begin with, will only be one appointment at a time in order to keep the 6 feet social distancing required to make this work. The branch is so small, it's about the size of my office here. Not that my office is huge, it's just a small branch. But staff are preparing for that. They are, a lot of them had prepared to move in the summer and then had to rearrange some things for Tier 4, for an extended Tier 4. But they're working on it now. I'll be going to visit both of them early next week. We're planning on doing a press release midweek this week, a social media, and then sending another electronic newsletter out that also will mention upcoming changes in services to some other locations. Because all of the current Tier 3 locations are looking to, in the next few weeks, add some potential hours and maybe services. In Louisa, 5, we're looking to expand to maybe 7 people coming in at a time because we're running into family units that are larger than 5. So by the end of the day, next Monday, all of our branches except for the ones in the urban ring will be in Tier 3 appointment service, adding hours over time. And the goal is going to be to work with Charlottesville to open the city area branches. I'm aiming for between Thanksgiving and Christmas for Gordon Avenue, Northside, and Central. Albemarle has been reviewing the Tier 3 plans to make sure that they don't have any objections to Crozet and Scottsville. I have heard none so far. They were okay with the original Tier 3 non-appointment plans. So far, I think we're fine there. In Charlottesville, we'll talk to Letitia and try to get a hold of the interim city manager as well, just to make sure we're all on the same page about offering services. Appointment only, again, starting with 5 per location and then expanding that as we see what demands are. So I didn't prepare the same statistics that I did last month, and I'm happy to send some around. But so far, we are finding a lot of success in Greene, Louisa, and Nelson. We're finding a lot of usage. The computer usage is beginning to pick up. I was surprised, I think I mentioned last month, at the fact that most of our appointments were for browsing, not for computer use. Well, that's starting to even out some. We've got lots of people coming in. Back to Nelson, Marcy was mentioning earlier that they've got folks that are coming from Charlottesville in order to use the computers in Nelson on a weekly basis. So it'll be good to be able to offer them something a little closer in the weeks to come. Staff have been able to do this very safely. The EPC is meeting and reviewing data. The other day, the CDC changed their close contact definition. So we got together to review Tier 3 and Tier 4 guidelines and make sure that wouldn't have any substantial changes on operations, and did not. I can take any questions about this, or if there's any information I don't have at hand, I'm happy to send it out to you.
David, do you have any idea how full the appointment slots are at the 3 different branches that are currently open? How many people might have to be turned away?
So far, we're not turning anybody away, although there are folks that cannot get their first choice of appointment. So if people are calling in and they're asking for the 10 o'clock slot and it's not available, they're pretty flexible at this point to say, okay, well, there's one at 11 or one at 12. Can you try to make that? So far, nobody has been turned away. The only services that we've turned people away for, that we get requests for, are notarizations. That's come up quite a few times where folks are looking to get something notarized and it's not part of JMRL's Tier 3 plan. Everybody else we've been able to accommodate, just not at their first choice of time.
Wendy?
I had a question related to you're going to expand the time a little bit, but one thing I think was very helpful here, I had a lot of response when you ran the second newspaper. So when you add the hours, I would suggest doing that for several weeks in those areas so that people know, because hoping we'll see an increase now that, I mean, just in conversations I've had with, when I announce it at a meeting or something that I go to, they say, the last time they said, oh yeah, I just saw that in the paper. So I think that's important when you're changing the others to the new appointment only.
That's
And then-
great. And we are working, Jessalyn is working to try and get another story.
Yeah, that was good. Yeah.
We had an excellent story in the Greene County Record that had a very thorough interview with the branch manager there about what services were available. We've had great response for that. So I would love to duplicate that at every location.
Yeah.
Just along those same lines of making sure we have as much awareness of our current offering as possible. Are there signs at the drive-through, at the curbside locations? So when people go to curbside, are they sort of made aware that, hey, these appointments are available at those branches?
There is here.
There is, okay.
Mike, is your question about at the branch that's offering it or
Yeah, at the branches that offer it. Yeah,
Yes, there.
great.
We're a little bit of, for years we tried to minimize the signs that we had
Yeah.
in order to have consistent branding and messaging, but these days there's a lot of signs because there's a lot of information that needs.
Stuff people need to know, sure.
Yeah.
David, is there any way safely to start introducing notary services in any of the branches?
Well, the EPC has talked about this quite a few times and have not seen a path forward for that. The only thing that we have seen is the ability to maybe try to do something outside by appointment only specifically for that. The problem is really one of equity. There's only one notary at some locations, so it's not a service. And again, this is always the case. So there's not always a notary available. But what I don't want to see is people making an exception for somebody and then not for somebody else. So I'm a little nervous about offering kind of exterior appointments that aren't consistent. But we'll continue to work on it. It is something that we get asked a lot. And in Charlottesville, there are some other options, but there are not options at other locations. In Louisa, we got asked about faxing a lot. There was, before we got to tier 3, there was a tremendous need for faxing, and we were able to, staff there was able to figure out a way to make that work contactless. Notary is a little bit harder because it does require close proximity between two people. But I'll take that back to the EPC as like, hey, let's figure out a way to make this work if we're getting asked so much for it.
Okay, I think that would be useful, especially in the outlying
Yeah,
jurisdictions.
I agree.
Does anybody else have any questions or concerns about how this is going? I know that there was a lot of discussion about these openings. So I want to make sure that we're getting all the information that people need to feel comfortable as we start thinking about expanding hours and expanding numbers going into the branches.
I can say I'm pleased with how it's gone in Greene so far.
Even with all of the backdoor, front door manipulations that have to be done.
Let's see us open it up further to see how pleased I still am.
David, I just this question isn't really a critique at all of the plan. I guess it's a question about some of the speculation or what your thoughts might be on the speculation that we can expect numbers to rise, maybe nationally as well as in the state, as the weather gets colder and flu season converges on COVID. Do you have any thoughts about what a bump in infection rates might mean for the work that you're doing for the reopenings?
Yeah, I mean, it's been the thing mostly on my mind, Lisa, until recently when it's all been budget. So that's been a nice.
It's a nice distraction to have a pandemic. At first, it's like, I'm really worried about the budget. Now I have a pandemic to take my mind off things.
Yeah, so the percent positivity numbers in the region, the Blue Ridge Health District, are really strong now and have been for a while. But a large part of that, as Marcy reminds me, has to do with the testing happening at the university and the scale of that, and so it's impacting those numbers there. But everybody expects that there is going to be bumps and spikes based on those things that you described. People are worried about, I know in my own family, we're trying to figure out how are we going to do some sort of holidays. We're not going to be able to do it outside or whatnot. I believe that the model that we have in place at Greene, Louisa, and Nelson could continue throughout a bump because you're talking about nobody being in close contact with any members of the public. You're talking about everybody masked at all times. And you're talking about very limited people in a building to overwhelm an HVAC system. And you're talking about a massive amount of cleaning by staff that's happening on a daily basis. So I would be hesitant to push our numbers towards, 50% occupancy, or we just open the doors or whatnot until we get more data on what the winter is going to look like. But I think with the current model and moving it forward slowly, like from 5 to 7 in Louisa, it's based on the experiences that staff are having about what they can reasonably accommodate without getting into an area where people are breathing on each other. And like starting with one at Scottsville, I know that there was interest in allowing more than one person in because people are public servants and they're librarians and they want to be able to provide this service. But in the end, we made the decision to just start with one at a time to see where those corners are where people might bump into each other, to see what the needs are that we could maybe meet in some other way. If we can't do it in the building, as we were just talking about with notaries, how can we figure out a way to make it happen elsewhere? So basically, Lisa, I think that that if there is a bump locally, that the service that we're offering now in Tier 3 is conservative and safe enough that we could continue to offer it. The thing that would require us to back off that, I think, would be impact on staff if we had staff infections, or if we had an outbreak very locally in a community. If there was like right around the library, something in Scottsville, something like Scottsville itself had a problem, then we would certainly look at whether or not we could continue to safely offer it.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. Thank you.
You're welcome. And I would say that even if that were to happen, I would hope that we would still be able to offer curbside service even throughout any situation, hopefully. I also neglected to mention, just today, I was speaking with Bookmobile and Outreach Services staff about the potential for doing some neighborhood stops without people coming into the bus, but just a pickup, like basically a curbside pickup that comes to your curb at our neighborhood spots. They have already been offering the assisted living facilities drop off, where they drop books off at assisted living facilities. But we have not been doing neighborhood stops. When we're talking about moving the Charlottesville area branches into Tier 3, we will also talk about whether or not that can be safely accomplished. I think it can, but there are some details to work out there.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Any other comments, questions, concerns? Thanks, David. And please convey our admiration to the staff and support for what they're doing.
Sure will.
The next thing is sort of a mechanical thing. We had approved about $65,000 for purchase of a new box truck in order to keep our circulation moving. And that hasn't changed, but we weren't able to get the box truck in time to use it within that year's budget. So David would like for us to reapprove this so that it's clear that it can be used when the bus can be obtained, the box truck can be obtained. David, do you want to just briefly talk about the background for that and how you're dealing with the limited equipment that you have right now?
Sure. It's mostly just one of the trucks is aging out of these two trucks. They're knock on wood. They're both in good shape right now. We are the delivery issues that we had throughout the summer are mostly gone. We've hired one person and we've got a temp in to cover the rest of it. The trucks themselves, though, one of them is aging out. Jerry, you unmuted yourself there. Did you want to add something?
Just to be available, yeah, we've got, the older one has about 215,000 miles on it, 6 years old, and between the two trucks, we travel about 75,000 miles a year throughout the jurisdictions. So it's replacing capital equipment on a forward-thinking basis.
So the motion last year, Marcy, was to authorize the expenditure of up to $65,000 from JMRL's general fund for the purchasing of a new box truck.
Yes, and that is still the estimate.
I believe so. Jerry, any change on that?
Great. So everyone understands this is a restatement of support for purchase of a new box truck in order to help with our circulation. Do I have a motion from the board?
So moved.
Thank you. All in favor, say aye.
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 Is there anyone opposed? Great, thanks. I think that should take care of what you need, at least for the next few months.
Thank you all.
All right. David will give us his director's report for anything that he didn't already cover.
There's plenty. Just an update. Last month, I updated you all on the working group's recommendation that the meeting room on the third floor of the Central Library be renamed the Swanson Case Courtroom, and we opened up a mechanism for feedback on the library's website. We've gotten good response. We've got over 50 responses on it, and since the beginning of October. Overwhelmingly positive, only 3 who suggested that we don't change the name at all. The rest were supporting the change or asking questions about the change. So that you are aware, there were at least 2 responses that also asked the board to address the names of Jefferson and Madison in the library system. And this is something that I have heard from other members of the public throughout this year. So that's something that I believe the board is going to need to address moving forward. But for now, the feedback is open throughout the end of this month for the Swanson Case Courtroom. And unless there is an issue that we're not aware of that gets raised in that feedback, and if it remains overwhelmingly positive, the board will, the library will make the change internally. Of course, that room's not available and won't be available in tier 3. But we're also talking to the university about some sort of joint celebration moving forward, how to best publicize and celebrate this, probably in a virtual environment. I got some potentially good news the other day. The conferees met at the state level to approve a budget that did include all the gains that were made in state aid. So it was $1.5 million throughout the whole state. And JMRL's share of that was, I think, around $30,000 that would go into the materials budget. It has not made it through the governor's desk yet, so it's not official. And there are still, there's a lot of politicking that can happen between now and the end, but that's a very good sign. Some of it might be tied to very direct expenditures to help support virtual learning, and we have yet to hear what that would mean specifically. So normally this money would go into our books and materials budget, and we would use some of that to support remote learning by buying virtual books and virtual audio books and spending it on databases and things. But if there's specific language there that we need to be aware of, then we might have to allocate some of that. There was some talk of hotspots or something like that. And we do have a good hotspot lending program. So even if it was just to support that, that would be great. And then I just, 2 things. One, so I think you all got the email that Marcy sent around that that we're down a board member from Albemarle County with Erica's resignation, the county is accepting applications for that for 30 days. So there is an open application on the county's website, and they expect to make an appointment at their December 3rd, I believe, board meeting. So you all should be back to full complement at the end of December for your December meeting. And then the last thing I wanted to just show you, I know you're probably sick of my screen shares, but let me bring it up here, is a Learn at Home page that JMRL has been working on. It's going live. For support for virtual learning here, library resources for kids and teens. So there's some very general resources at the top with some nice icons there about how to get a new card, where our databases are, some book lists that are useful, the what do I read next function, ask a librarian, and information about getting on Wi-Fi and checking out Wi-Fi hotspots. But then very specific information broken out into resources for kids, resources for teens, and then resources for teachers and parents. So the goal here was to consolidate all of the things that JMRL has been offering and is developing now to support learn at home situations. And I was just very pleased with the work that went into this from children's staff, young adult staff, and IT staff working together to try and come up with a way to get all these things under one roof, as they say. So that's jmrl.org/learn-at-home. And I believe some press is going to go out about that, along with our virtual pumpkin carving contest this week. So lots of cool things happening. And that's it for my report.
Virtual pumpkins or virtual carving?
The pumpkin is real. The submissions are virtual.
Good.
I have a comment. I'm happy to see that page. But again, I don't see diversity in the pictures.
Let's look.
I didn't see any brown people or Black people. Maybe I missed it.
Okay, Kathy, we can certainly address that. Thank you.
Okay,
I only see the 2 pictures, so great. Thanks for the note.
Any other comments about this? I agree with Kathy. It's wonderful to see it all in one place. It's good to really represent our entire community.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Good. Are there any other matters that anyone on the board would like to raise before we adjourn? I have one thing that I would really like to ask the board to do between now and the next meeting. We've had our new searchable catalog available for quite some time. I've been putting Catherine through her paces for the last couple of weeks and trying to find all the bugs in it. So we've been working on that hard, and I would encourage all of you to use that and see if you can find any places where it doesn't work for you or where you're having trouble understanding what to do. And the other thing is that I'd really like for you to encourage everyone you know, including yourself, to use the library, the new library website, the beta, and try to get comments and feedback back to the IT staff about that. It's really hard. I think if our branches were open, we'd be able to get folks coming into the branches and being encouraged by the librarians to sit there with them and work through the new website beta. We don't have that option. So we're really going to need to do outreach for the community to make sure that it's used as well as possible so that IT staff is getting the feedback it needs before that goes live. Any other comments? Future agenda items? Budget.
Well, certainly there'll be a report from the budget committee as they're meeting next week. Hopefully, at least a discussion, hopefully an approval of the proposed budget. We can bring that customer service statement back too. And then Marcy, we had discussed the continuing ed on staff committees and also a report from the compensation committee. Are those two separate things in your mind, or would you like one kind of report on here are all the staff committees and here's what their tasks are, and then also here's the specific compensation committee because it does have budgetary implications?
I think focusing on the budget would probably be the most useful thing for us.
Comp committee.
Yes. You know, one of the things you could do is put together the list of the staff committees and send them around or put them on the Google Docs page. So
yeah, that's on the staff intranet. I can share that with everybody.
Okay, that would probably be a useful way to start for that. But I think we need to focus on the budget if that's all right with you.
That sounds great. Thank you.
Any other agenda items that any other board members would like to raise for the next meeting? Remember, we'll be meeting the Monday after Thanksgiving. So I'd like to wish everybody a happy holiday. I know that it will be different, but I hope you find ways to celebrate with your families. May I have a motion?
Thank you very much.
Thank you. We have a motion to adjourn the meeting. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Is there anyone opposed? I think we got you out of here, Thomas.
Thank you.
Thomas has a board meeting in Scottsville to go to next. Lucky man.
We're meeting with the Albemarle County Board of Supervisors for the first time, as far as anyone can tell, in recorded history. So it's,
Oh, that ought to be
should be interesting. Yeah.
It's a party.
Well, thank you all very much. Yeah, right.
We have a very low bar for calling something a party these days.
Can I make a quick announcement?
Yes.
I know we're adjourned, but actually the schedule has the next board meeting on the 23rd.
On the 23rd. Oh, so the Monday before.
Is that the
I
Monday
have it on my
before?
calendar wrong then, David.
Yeah, the approved schedule that we did in the summer has the 23rd.
Thanks for correction.
Sure, if we wanted to change that, you all could discuss it, but that's what it is for now.
Okay. Thanks for the correction.
No problem.
Have a good month, you all.
Bye-bye, take care.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.